Hello and welcome to Lost Love Mystery, where we explore the twists and turns of love, the pain of betrayal, and the mysteries that lie hidden in the heart. After his first marriage ended, a devoted single father, 38M, found love again with a woman who initially seemed supportive. However, after they got married, she grew resentful of his 14-year-old daughter, calling her a burden and trying to control finances. Tensions escalated until she outright insulted his daughter, forcing him to choose between his wife and child. He chose his daughter, kicked his wife out, and filed for divorce. His ex retaliated with false abuse claims and even weaponized CPS, but her manipulations failed in court. With the divorce finalized, he and his daughter are finally at peace, learning the importance of trusting instincts and prioritizing family. If you want to know what happens next in this story, stay tuned and enjoy. Let's begin today's story. My perfect second marriage shattered the day my wife called my daughter a burden. In that moment, I made my choice. I packed her bags and left her begging. I'm 38 years old, a single father to my 14-year-old daughter, my entire world. I got full custody years ago when my first marriage fell apart. My ex walked away without looking back, and I stepped up. It was just the two of us against the world for so long that I never expected to find love again. But then, a mutual friend introduced me to a woman, 35F, who seemed like she could be the missing piece in our lives. From the start, she admired my devotion as a father. She told me it was rare to see a man so dedicated to his child, and I was flattered. She had a son, too, but she was vague about the details, said he mostly lived with her ex across the country due to a messy custody battle. I didn't press her for more, too caught up in the excitement of possibly finding a partner who accepted both me and my daughter. Within a few months, she moved in with us. My parents, especially my father, warned me to take things slow, but I was convinced I'd finally found happiness again. At first, everything felt perfect. She cooked for us, helped my daughter with homework, joined our movie nights. We were building a home together. Still, there were signs. Small, easy-to-ignore things. She'd get irritated when my daughter did normal kid stuff, left her shoes in the hallway, forgot to rinse a dish. But I brushed it off as differences in upbringing. A year into our relationship, we got married in a small ceremony with close friends and family. My father pulled me aside before the wedding and said, "Son, I just don't think she's right for you." I was annoyed but dismissed it. I should have listened. The first cracks in our marriage showed soon after. My wife started complaining about money, though we kept our finances separate. I'd learned my lesson after my first divorce. She didn't like that. She wanted everything combined, to be a real family. When I refused, she began nitpicking my spending, especially when it came to my daughter. Piano lessons, school clubs, things my daughter loved, were suddenly a waste of money. She claimed I was spoiling her, that she should earn these privileges. The atmosphere at home changed. My daughter, once carefree, became tense whenever my wife was around. She tiptoed, afraid to set her off. Then came the moment that broke everything. One evening, we argued about my daughter's after-school programs. My wife snapped. "She's a burden on this family," she spat. "Stop treating her like a princess." My daughter overheard. I saw the hurt in her eyes, a wound too deep to mend. I sent her to her room and turned to my wife, my voice shaking with rage. "Never speak about my child like that again." She stormed off, acting like she was the victim. That night, I tried to talk it out, but she flipped it on me. "You always take her side. You never listen to me." Over the next few weeks, things spiraled. She treated my daughter like an inconvenience, snapped at her for eating snacks after dinner, left passive-aggressive notes about chores, rolled her eyes whenever my daughter spoke. Every confrontation ended the same way, her accusing me of being blinded by fatherly love, of letting my daughter manipulate me. One night, we had a massive fight. My daughter had a big music competition at school. My wife wanted a date night. When I told her I'd be at the competition, she lost it. "You care more about a stupid school concert than me," she screamed. Then she sneered. "Maybe you should just marry your daughter." The disgust I felt in that moment, I nearly walked out then and there. Instead, I went to my parents' house to cool off. When I told them, my father shook his head. "I told you, son." My mother just hugged me and said, "You and your daughter deserve better." I still wanted to salvage my marriage. I suggested counseling, but my wife refused. "I don't need therapy," she scoffed. "You and your daughter do. You're the problem." Then came the final straw. One morning, we argued over bills again. She exploded in front of my daughter. She's a freeloader. All she does is drain our resources. My daughter's face crumbled. She ran to her room, but I saw the damage was done. I turned to my wife, my voice deadly calm. If you make me choose between you and my daughter, you lose. She smirked. No woman wants a man that tied to his kid. Something inside me snapped. I exhaled, steady and sure. Pack your bags. We're done. Her face twisted in shock. She tried to argue, then turned on the waterworks, blamed stress, childhood trauma, anxiety, anything to make me back down. I was unmoved. She wailed, I have nowhere to go. I reminded her, this is my house. Then came the threats, calling her parents, dragging me into legal battles. I didn't budge. I took my daughter to the car and waited. When I returned, she was still sitting there, suitcase by her feet, stunned that I had actually followed through. Is there really no way to fix this? She asked weakly. I shook my head. Not after what you said. She snapped, screaming that I was throwing away a good woman over a spoiled child. That's enough, I said, pointing to the door. Hours later, her parents arrived, furious. They called me cruel, said I abandoned my wife. My father-in-law puffed his chest and shouted about my responsibilities as a husband. My mother-in-law scolded me for choosing my daughter over my marriage. I looked them dead in the eye. Do you seriously think any decent parent would tolerate someone calling their kid a burden? Silence. They had no real answer, just more yelling. But I was done. Eventually, they packed her things into their car and left. My daughter was at a friend's house. When I picked her up, I pulled her into a hug. I'm sorry it took me so long. Tears welled up in her eyes. I feel like it's my fault. I cupped her face. No, you are the best thing in my life. And I will never let anyone treat you that way again. We drove to my parents' house that night, leaving the past behind. On the way, my phone buzzed with messages from my wife, some begging, some cursing me out. I blocked her. And just like that, the nightmare ended. My daughter and I, we were free. The next morning at work, where I'm a floor supervisor at a local distribution warehouse, my wife actually showed up in the lobby, causing a big scene and demanding I talk to her. Security had to escort her out. I was beyond embarrassed and furious. That's when I decided to contact a divorce lawyer. It had only been a handful of months since we'd gotten married, so I figured we could probably get through the process without too much drama, assuming she cooperated. Of course, she didn't. She started telling mutual friends I was abusive and that I kicked her out for no reason. Most of them didn't buy it, but a few did. I guess that was just another cost of this whole situation. I stayed focused on protecting my daughter and filed the divorce papers, citing irreconcilable differences. My lawyer advised me to save all communication, so I kept screenshots of her texts, which ranged from sobbing apologies to calling my daughter nasty names. Then, a week later, Child Protective Services showed up at my door because someone anonymously claimed I was neglecting my daughter. The CPS worker took one look at our place, checked the fridge, and basically said, "This is a waste of my time. Everything looks fine." I knew exactly who made that call. I told my lawyer, and he said we might bring it up in the divorce as evidence of harassment. I felt a surge of anger, but also relief. It confirmed I was dealing with someone who would stoop to any level to get her way. That's when I decided to dig into her past a bit more. She never let me meet her ex-husband, never fully explained why she lost custody of her son. A friend of mine, who's good at online sleuthing, helped me track down her ex's social media profile. I sent him a polite message, introducing myself as her new husband and explaining that I just wanted to know if there was anything I should be aware of. He responded quickly, saying he'd be happy to talk because he'd gone through a nightmare with her. We had a phone call, and he told me she had tried forging documents to frame him as an unfit father. It backfired so badly that he got full custody. She eventually moved across the country to start fresh. I told him about how she was treating my daughter, and he said it sounded exactly like her usual manipulative pattern. He offered to send me any court documents that might help prove she had a history of lying and making false claims. I accepted, and my lawyer was thrilled to have extra backup in case she tried something bigger. Meanwhile, my wife was still texting me from random numbers, leaving voicemails, crying about how she wanted to go to therapy or do whatever it took to fix our marriage. But every time I considered it, I remembered her calling my daughter a burden. There was no coming back from that. I was mentally preparing for a long, ugly divorce when we finally had our first court hearing. She showed up with a cheap lawyer, looking devastated, claiming I abused her emotionally and financially. She had zero evidence. Meanwhile, my lawyer calmly laid everything out. The messages where she insulted my daughter, the CPS stunt, the documents from her ex-husband's case, even a statement from my parents about what they had witnessed. The judge looked more and more unimpressed with every passing minute. Her lawyer tried to ask for temporary spousal support, claiming she had nowhere else to go. The judge pointed out she lived with her parents, had a job, and denied the request on the spot. My wife's face just fell. She glared at me like this was all my fault, but I just looked away. Over the next few weeks, the divorce process dragged on. She kept trying different angles, posting on social media that I was a monster, telling people I kidnapped my daughter from her rightful mother, which made zero sense. But none of it stuck because people knew my real story. After a few more court appearances, the judge finalized everything in my favor. She didn't get spousal support. She didn't get a dime from me. She had to walk away with whatever she managed to pack when she left. The judge wasn't even subtle about how unconvincing her claims were. When we left the courtroom, my wife stormed away, cursing under her breath while her parents followed. From what I heard, they were mad at her for messing up again. I packed all her leftover belongings, boxed them up, and mailed them to her parents' address. I included a brief note telling her not to contact me or my daughter. After that, she tried calling from different numbers a few times, but I ignored them. My father said if she ever tried to show up at his house again, he'd call the authorities. My daughter was relieved beyond words. She stopped feeling like she had to hide in her own home. She started focusing on her music again, and she's doing great in school. It's wild how quickly I went from thinking I'd found the perfect partner to watching the whole thing crumble. But the truth is, she never truly cared about my kid. She wanted me to herself, or maybe just my money, or both. My daughter, on the other hand, was just an obstacle she wished would go away. That's the hardest thing to realize, that I missed so many early warning signs because I wanted this relationship to work so badly. I've learned that my kid always comes first, no matter what. If a partner isn't okay with that, they can walk away. I'm sharing this mess of a story here because maybe someone else is in a similar spot, feeling like something's off, but not wanting to believe it. Let me tell you, if someone disrespects your child, run. It won't get better. They'll only get bolder and nastier. And in my case, she escalated to weaponizing CPS and creating wild abuse allegations. If I hadn't stayed calm, documented everything, and lawyered up fast, she might have caused a lot more damage. I'm relieved the divorce is finalized. I'm still annoyed about the time and energy I wasted, but it's better to cut my losses than stay stuck in a toxic marriage. My daughter and I went through a rough patch emotionally, but we're in a better place now. The house is quiet in a good way, and we're free to live our lives without tiptoeing around someone's outbursts. My parents have been super supportive. My mother keeps reminding me that at least this situation only lasted a short while, compared to people who stay in bad marriages for years. I'm taking a long break from dating. Not saying I'll never date again, but I need to rebuild my trust in people. My daughter is my priority. Seeing her laugh again, practice her music, and hang out with friends makes me realize I did the right thing. Sometimes a parent has to make tough choices, but this one was actually pretty simple once I realized my wife was never going to respect my daughter. So yeah, that's my story. I got a second chance at marriage, thought it would be great, but when my wife called my daughter a burden, everything fell apart. I chose my kid, told my wife to leave, and endured the storm of drama until I got a divorce. She tried every trick, but in the end, she faced the consequences. My daughter is safe and happy, and that's all that matters. I have zero regrets about slamming that door shut when I did. My advice: trust your gut, protect your child, and don't let anyone guilt trip you into thinking otherwise. Life's too short to be stuck with someone who brings negativity into your home. Lesson learned. We're moving forward, and that's all that matters.